Welcome to Your Yes-Filled Life. I'm your host, Brenda Winkle, educator, healer, speaker, guide, and fierce advocate for your yes. I help sensitive and successful men and women find, reclaim, and live from their full embodied yes. Through empowering you to understand your energetic hygiene, establish healthy boundaries, and heal your nervous system, you'll be able to create your yes-filled life and move through your days with more freedom, more ease, and more joy. You'll hear inspiring stories of people who found their full-bodied yes, thought leaders who pursued their own dreams and are living life on their terms, and learn new ways to find the courage, joy, ease, and freedom to more fully step into your yes-filled life. Say no to the good so you can say yes to the great. Join me on this journey to discover your yes-filled life. Whether you're looking to break free from the golden handcuffs, start a new business, find your dream job, or simply live with more intention and mindfulness, I've got you covered. Let's explore the possibilities together and make your dreams a reality. Ready? Let's do this. Let's get you to your yes-filled life. Breathe in the power of intuition. Unlock your inner wisdom with breath work. What would it be like to stop overthinking? What would your life look like if you felt clarity and ease? How would your life change if your nervous system felt regulated and you could access a state of calm even when there are storms all around you? Get ready to unlock the incredible power of your intuition and connect with your inner wisdom on a deeper level and access a deeper sense of calm. You are invited to join a transformative journey with an exclusive PDF guide and video series designed to amplify your success and well-being in this free 4-part video series, Breathwork to Strengthen and Trust Your Intuition. This valuable free resource is designed specifically for high achievers and successful people just like you who are committed to personal and professional growth, aligning with your desires and embracing your own wisdom within. You get to watch at your own pace when you get instant access to the entire series. Created for high achievers on the go, each video is less than 15 minutes. You'll also have access to a PDF guide with various breathwork patterns so that you can take breathwork with you anywhere. To get your instant access to this free 4-part series and PDF guide, go to brendawinkle.com/breathe. That's brendawinkle.com/BREATHE. Hello and welcome to Your Yes-Filled Life. I'm your host, Brenda Winkle. I'm so excited for today's episode. Today, we have Lucas Root on the podcast. Lucas Root is a technologist, community builder, and leadership coach with a passion for using technology to improve the world. As a leading expert in artificial intelligence, also known as AI, and its potential to transform society, Lucas is dedicated to leveraging technology to build stronger, more inclusive communities. With a career spanning various industries, including technology, finance, and retail, Lucas has held senior positions at several Fortune 100 companies, developing and implementing strategies for using technology to achieve business goals. As the founder and CEO of several successful businesses, including the SGIC consulting firm, Lucas has proven his ability to lead and innovate. Now, Lucas's work extends far beyond the private sector. As a frequent speaker and writer on the topic of technology and its impact on society, Lucas has shared his insights and experience at conferences worldwide. His articles have been published in leading publications such as Forbes, and he hosts the Elements of Community podcast, where he interviews industry leaders about their experiences building and sustaining successful communities. Now, I'm going to be a guest on Lucas's podcast in the upcoming weeks. And so come back to this episode in a week or two, and I will link that episode in the show notes here. You are going to love this conversation because not only is Lucas everything that I just told you, he is a champion for women's rights. Without further ado, let's get to know Lucas Root. Hi, Lucas. Thank you for joining me.
Hi, Brenda. Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited about this conversation because when we had our initial meeting call on Zoom to get to know each other after a mutual friend introduced us, I just felt like there's so much we can talk about that I think the challenge for us is going to be to limiting the time of this podcast episode, not looking for
But you
things
didn't
to
tell
talk
me
about.
that. There's no limit.
So before we dive in, and I know we'll dive in, would you tell our listeners just a little bit about yourself and the work that you do in the world?
Yeah, I would love it. Thank you. Um, I was on Wall Street for 17 years doing mergers and acquisitions. I was the guy on the back end um, who would sort of figure out how to stitch together the two companies that were being merged, which was an amazing job. It filled my head with the puzzle piece solving strategy brain for forever. I could have done it forever, honestly. It was so much fun. And I was positively impacting the lives of basically everybody I was touching because I was helping them figure out how to be the next best version of themselves.
Mm.
I loved it. 8 years ago, I left Wall Street, launched my own consulting company, and landed my largest and now longest client, the Pokemon Company, as my sort of anchor client, as a business strategy consultant. Now I'm still working with them. I don't still take consulting clients. I have this core group of four that I've been with for the shortest one for 3 years and the longest one now for 8 years. And when I got to that point where I was just like, okay, I'm good. That was about 2018. My brain sort of opened up from the stress of having to make sure that I was good, and I could settle into thinking about the world that I wanted to live in. And that's when I started doing some of the stuff that you will see if you go digitally stalk me, and please do. Those of us that appear on podcasts like this are open to digital stalking, so let's play that game. Um,
That's right.
yeah, I'm here for it. Stalk me. And what you'll see is you'll see a lot of stuff about community and a lot of stuff about women. And I continue to focus on that stuff since about 2018. My perspective has shifted, and in many ways it has grown, and in a few ways it has shrunk and become more focused and narrow. Focused is a good thing. But yeah, 2018 was sort of the beginning of the freedom to be able to pursue what kind of world do I want to live in, and I am eternally grateful to amazing clients like the Pokemon Company that make that possible for me.
I love that. And when you say that it helped you open up the world you wanted to create, that's so empowering. And I'm just wondering, have you always been the kind of person that had the courage and the vision to jump into creating the world that you want?
Well, vision is evolving, but courage for sure. Vision is evolving. My one of my favorite stories, I don't remember this, but one of my favorite stories about me as a baby is my parents took me. I grew up in northern Vermont. My parents took me to the beach in Maine, and of course, you all know that up in Maine, the water is very, very cold all year round. And I don't know, I was two, maybe three, and my parents set me down on the beach, and I ran straight into the water. Didn't even pause to catch a breath, and of course got decimated by the little 1.5 foot, 2 foot waves of Maine. My parents were like, "Yeah, cool, let him do it. He'll shake himself off and come back up here onto the it's cold water. Like getting decimated by waves isn't fun." Apparently, I stayed in there trying to figure out how to stay in the water for something like 10 minutes, and I probably was breathing water for half of my breaths.
Mm.
Um, and finally, my father went over there and picked me up and sort of shook me out and helped me cough out the water from my lungs and took me back up on the beach and set me down and said, "Why don't you stay here for a little while?" And apparently, I waited until he wasn't looking and went straight back into the water. Um, and kept at it until more or less he said, "You're not going in the water anymore. We're going to stay here, and you can put your feet in the water, and that's it." So he had to set boundaries for me. Um,
Mm,
and thank goodness he did, because that was the beginning. That story right there was the beginning of me learning how to set boundaries. So courage has never been an issue for me.
mm.
I've never had any issue pursuing something that I believed I wanted to pursue.
I love
And
hearing that.
learning to set boundaries that make it healthy is an ongoing skill set that I continue to develop. And understanding how boundaries and vision intersect
Mm.
has been for me the thing I've had to struggle with.
I teach boundaries and I tell
Mm.
people anytime I'm working with them on boundaries, I teach what I most needed to know.
Mm.
And so I that resonates with me. And my boundary work came about in a different way. It came about relationally, where I
Mm.
needed to create the boundary between merging with somebody and then becoming like a people pleasing amoeba kind of a person, and then being able to stay in my own beingness and be relationally connected to somebody else. But
Yeah.
I still had to learn the boundaries.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Awesome.
when you say that you left your corporate career, a lot of the listeners of the Your Yes Filled Life podcast are trapped in what they perceive to be golden handcuffs. And I was too, as a teacher
Oh,
with
I get it.
26 years, in the field, and retirement waiting for me, and the health plan and all the things. And I have found since leaving that there's actually so much freedom, and I can create those other kinds of supports on my own. What was your experience like?
Mm. So I also had golden handcuffs of my own creation.
Mhm.
Um, One of the stories I like to tell is my first year on Wall Street. I made $21,000. That was before I'd worked my way into a position where I was salaried, and so 21,000 was how much I sold, how much I hit, how much I killed and brought in. Wall Street is a pretty ruthless industry. My expenses that year were $28,000, and my student loans were all on forbearance. So it was $28,000 just to earn that 21,000.
Mm, mhm, mhm,
Um, I took that and over the following 17 years added a zero to it. When I left Wall Street, I think I was making about 280,000, which is good money. That's a golden handcuff if there ever
mhm,
was one.
mhm,
My first year as a consultant, I made $8,000, significantly less even than the $21,000 I made on Wall Street my first year. And so I completely, totally understand when people are looking at the 280 that they're making right now and looking at the 8,000 that they're going to make over the year after they take the leap, that those things are terrifying. And they are.
mhm,
It took me about 4 years to replace my income. And I probably could not have done it concurrently the way that I did it. There are other ways to do it.
mhm,
There are routes where you can do it concurrently. It took me about 4 years. I now make considerably more than I made when I was on Wall Street, and it took a little over 4 years to get there.
mhm. I
I
love
would
that
say
honesty. Thank
take the
you.
leap.
Yeah, take the leap. So I just completed my first year full time. I've been in this field for about 8 years, and I was working in my teaching job and concurrent. And for me, the teaching job was, and I loved what I did. Don't get me wrong. I
Mm.
truly loved my students. I loved what I did. But all I could think about was the work I'm doing now.
Mm.
And it felt like it was
Oh,
just
I love
getting
that.
in the way of the work that I'm doing now. All I want to do was talk to people and heal people. Well, I don't do the healing. I just am a catalyst for the healing. I conduit things. Um, Everyone heals
Nice.
themselves. I just want to say that so that there's no weird energy there. But when we're thinking about taking the leap, it can be really scary because I left behind a really secure career, and it's been the best decision I've ever made. There's
Oh,
so
yes.
much freedom. And to your point, my first full-time year, I did not knock the finances out of the park. Like, it was a significant pay cut the first year, but
I
I'm
hope you did
already,
better than 8,000.
I'd have to go back and look to tell you totally. It was slightly better than 8,000. I think it was, in the maybe 21, $22,000 mark. But now I'm on track to, do better. It's a learning
Nicely
curve.
done. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think I think people think about sales the wrong way, if I may say that.
Yeah.
I think people think about sales in terms of something that they don't do and that they're not good at and that they're afraid of. And so here's my invitation, everyone who's listening. You do sales all the time.
Mhm.
You are in sales permanently, constantly, everywhere, all the time. You are selling to your spouse that staying married to you is the best choice that they can make tomorrow. You're selling to your kids that listening to you is better than deciding to run out into the street without holding your hand. And that's both metaphorical and absolutely 100% literal, because sometimes that's exactly what you're selling to them. And sometimes it's metaphorical, like, hey, listen to me. Launching your own business is a hard thing. You shouldn't just go dump all of your life savings and give it a shot. Maybe, I'm not saying don't do it, but maybe sit down and have some thought about it and talk with me about it. And let's put together a business plan. And, you're going to spend your life savings and you're going to do this, but let's be smart about it. That is sales.
Mhm.
That is sales.
100%.
And I think that one of the biggest things that hold people back from launching their own business is fear of sales. And just stop and think for a minute about how much sales you're doing all the time and how extraordinarily successful you've been at doing that sales all the time.
Mhm. Mhm. Absolutely. I agree with that 100%. And the other thing is people need your magic. They
Hmm.
really need it. They are dying to pay you to help them to provide the service, whether it's entertainment or healing or knowledge or consulting. People need the magic that every single one of us has.
Yeah.
And when we can get out of our own way and realize that we are helping by selling, it changes everything.
Kind of like keeping your kids from running out into the street.
Yeah, exactly.
We are helping by selling.
We're helping by selling. That's right. So going from Wall Street to women and issues around women and building community, can you tell us, first of all, where the intersection lies between women and community, or maybe it doesn't? You could tell us more about that. And then I also want to make sure that we leave space to hear about your work in AI, because you are one of the leading experts in AI. So I want to make sure we dive into that. But first, let's talk about women and community.
I love it. Yeah. Um, my awakening moment, and I'll tell you what awakening means after I tell you about the moment. My awakening moment in 2018 was, literally, I sat back in my chair. My wife was actually in the room with me when it happened. I sat back in my chair and I was like, "Oh my God, we made it. We're good. We we don't have to worry for a while." We didn't. It was 2018. We didn't know we'd have 5 years plus. I'm looking forward at the next 6 months, and I don't see any of my clients rolling off. I mean, knock on some wood for that. um, and this feeling of relief just washed through us both, and of course we celebrated, and very shortly thereafter I was hit by this ton of bricks idea that should be obvious, and honestly we should teach everybody, and it's very simple, although it takes a little bit of a story. In 1911, long time ago, the very first second Nobel Prize was awarded to a scientist. The very first time a Nobel Prize was awarded to a scientist for the second time. Um, and so this very first scientist to receive a Nobel Prize for the second time was a woman. It was Madame Curie.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm a scientist, and so I see these things first, and then this is fact, and then I start rebuilding the stories that I have in my head to align with the fact that I'm sitting there on. if the very first scientist ever to receive a Nobel Prize a second time, and there have only been 4 total. So she's number one of 4.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Happened in 1911. Why didn't we start changing policies in 1911 to make way for women right then? Right then.
Mm-hmm.
Now I sat back with free open space in my brain, not having to worry about whether or not I'm going to have enough sales next week or next month or next year. I sat back and I said, what the F?
Mm-hmm.
Why? Why is it 105 years later that I'm realizing, number one, this story that should be told everywhere. And number two, when we tell the story, we should be telling about how, hey, we all realize that the systems weren't set up to support women. And clearly there are plenty of women out there that are extraordinary, and we should do a better job being partners,
Mm-hmm.
being partners, being partners, Brenda.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that, Lucas, because when you're talking about a partnership, there's something really special and it's subtle and it's nuanced. But when we're talking about being partners, there's mutual support.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so important.
And um, and thank God for the women that have fought for their own rights over the last 105 years. But how much of that effort that was put into fighting for their rights could have been put into building the world differently, better?
Mm-hmm.
How much technology am I losing out on today because smart, capable women were focused on marching on Washington
Mm-hmm.
instead of feeling free to contribute to the world in amazing ways?
Mm-hmm. Yes,
Now, in
absolutely.
2018, I sat down and started looking at all the statistics around this idea, and they were out there. You could
Mm-hmm.
find them. You had to dig for them, but you could find them. Here's what I found. Of the top 500 Dow listed companies, 8% of them have female CEOs, and those female CEOs outperform the men in their category by 34%. Brenda, if I were a board member and somebody presented a number like that to me, I would fire my male CEO without prejudice, pay him his golden parachute. It's not about him underperforming, and I would replace him with the first capable, qualified female CEO I could find, because that number is so huge
Mm-hmm.
that, as far as I'm concerned, today, right now, every single board member should be sued by their shareholders for not pursuing that number.
Absolutely.
And I
Absolutely.
know that's a really powerful statement.
It is, especially when we look at, you said 8%.
8%.
8% are women-led
And they
companies.
outperform in their category by 34%. Massive,
Mm-hmm.
massive number.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's hard to ignore a stat like that.
I understand why people are ignoring it. They're asking the question, and it's a good question, but it's also irrelevant. They're asking the question, why? Why are the women outperforming the men by 8% or by 34%? I get it.
Mm-hmm.
We as a society should be asking that question. Board members should not be asking that question. This is a well-documented market anomaly, and they should be moving as fast as they can to take advantage of it. And the shareholders should be holding them accountable to that. Let me ask you, if you knew that housing prices are falling and you were in charge of a housing investment firm, would you continue to invest as the housing prices are falling, or would you wait until they were down lower and you were reasonably sure they were at the bottom before you started investing again?
I would wait.
I would too.
Yeah.
It's a market anomaly. I have reasonable data and reasonable assurance that I
Mm-hmm.
understand the market anomaly. I'm going to wait. And waiting in that case is taking advantage of the market anomaly.
Mm-hmm.
It,
Exactly.
advantage of the market anomaly. Right now, we have an established, documented market anomaly where qualified female CEO candidates will outperform their male counterparts. You should not be waiting.
Yes. Yes. So my mom, she's going to be so mad at me. She turned 75 this year. Her birthday's in October, and my mom was in the ERA times in the 80s. And,
Mhm.
she marched, she picketed, she joined clubs, she did all the things. My brother-in-law still wears the
Would you please share
ERA.
my love with her?
Oh, yes. Yes. I'm a little bit emotional about that. She would love that. My brother-in-law still wears her ERA apron every night when
Mm,
he cooks dinner for my sister and
mm,
their family, because it's just such an important part of our family heritage, knowing that, that was so important to my mom that she was willing to really put herself out there in a time when a lot of women were not doing that. And, my mom still says things like, we've already fought for this. Why are we coming back around? And it's so interesting to hear her perspective as somebody who, according to her, and I don't mean that in any way disrespectful, but this is her perception, her lived experience. She had two choices of what she wanted to be when she grew up. And that was a teacher or a secretary, or maybe a
mm,
nurse, but a nurse wasn't an option for her personally. So she took it
mm.
off of the table. And she just is so passionate about the choice that we now have as women to literally be or do anything we want. And my personal mission is to empower as many people as I can to do and be and have whatever they want. And so I'm just so grateful that you are out there doing this work, because it matters and it makes a
Yeah.
difference. Thank you.
Well, um, let me now empower some men to get behind me and you and your mother on this. As soon as I looked at this data, that female CEOs outperform their male counterparts by 34%, I, of course, also spent some time thinking about why, and I have some theories. That's not what I want to talk about.
Mhm.
We can talk about that, but I think it's a separate and far less important conversation. The next thing I did was I understand the lost opportunity that I'm sitting on 105 years since Madame Curie received her second Nobel Prize.
Mhm.
But what about the future? How much opportunity are we looking at over the coming 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years? McKinsey did a study that year in 2018 and published the results. And the results that McKinsey published, and this is why men should be paying attention to this. They should not be running scared. They should be grabbing onto this with both hands and pulling as hard as they can. The study that McKinsey published said that if we got to gender parity in C-suite by 2025, it would unlock $34 trillion of new economic activity. New economic activity,
Mhm.
which means for all you men who are listening and for all you women who are listening, the men who support women are giving up nothing.
Mhm. Mhm. Yes, let that land, listeners. Let that land. We're talking about expansion. We know that we're in a constantly expanding universe. And by allowing more women with a seat at the table of C-suite offices, we are expanding our global finances.
$34 trillion.
Mm, that's
I don't
mind
know
blowing.
about you, but I would love that right now. I would love the technology that's creating that $34 trillion. I would love to change the way that our carbon footprint is playing out in the world today, regardless of what you believe in it.
Mhm. Mhm.
I would love to see the expansion of infrastructure that brings me faster internet and cheaper electricity because of incredibly smart, incredibly capable men and women partnering to make my life better.
Mhm. I love that. I love that. Mm. Just letting that marinate for a minute. It just feels really good. in my system just to think about the possibility and to think about if every listener shares this episode with one man and one woman you love, think about the reach that this could have. So, listeners, invitation to share this episode with one man and one woman that you love.
Oh, yes, please.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So I can tell how you are able to build community because you come in with a heart-led, heart-centered approach and you have science to back everything that you say. And that really does a beautiful job of speaking to all the parts of people because you're able to speak truth in a way that is palatable and also eases people's minds.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And you have a podcast that would you like to talk about your podcast?
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I launched it a year and a half ago. It's called The Elements of Community. I had two goals. The first is I have a theory. My theory is that people have forgotten what community means. And you can see evidence of that, whether it's true or not. That's my theory. You can see evidence of that in the way people use the word community. They throw it around all over the place. My example of that was the apartment complex that I lived in had 334 units in it, and it called itself a community. There it was in big letters every single time I'd drive in. And every single time I would drive in and look at that and remember that I know zero of those 333 other units. And how can it possibly be a community if I know nobody there? Now, that's partly my fault. I didn't make the effort of going to my neighbor and asking for a cup of sugar. Partly my fault. Partly their fault. Partly the fault of my neighbor who didn't make the effort of coming to me and asking me for a cup of sugar. But much more important to me than that, the fact that I hadn't made the effort or received the effort of somebody trying to build community, is the fact that there it is emblazoned on the wall that I see every single time I drive in, that somebody is calling my complex, where I loved living there. I was there for 4 years. I loved that apartment. I loved that complex. I loved that location. They were calling it a community, and it was not. And that means that people don't know what the word is, the people who put it there, and also all of the people who drive by it every day and don't complain about the fact that that's not the right word for this. Now, what if that's true everywhere? And if that's true everywhere, if nobody knows what community means, then how can you possibly build the story of you in the world today to include this thing that you don't understand? That's not the way we do things. We don't build the story of me to include things that we don't understand. And I need us to. Community matters a lot. The love that I have for the people around me is what sustains me on my down days.
Absolutely.
How horrible is it that people don't build that into their story? So my number one goal was to retell the story of community so that people can bring it into their lives. My number two goal was, if we've forgotten what it meant, maybe we've also forgotten how to create it and how to sustain it. Maybe, I don't know. So a year and a half ago, that was my mission, to tell the story and to relearn what it meant so that I could tell people. And I came in with a theory about that too. At the time, I had 4 elements of community. I'm now up to 6.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
What are those? What are those elements? What are the 6?
Yeah. Well, the first 4 was language. And this is more than just the language English that we are speaking over the phone, right? It's the inside stories that we use. It's the way that we make eye contact or shake hands. It's even the clothes that we wear. Language is very nuanced for humanity. And the nuances that are possible in language are all taken advantage of in community.
Absolutely.
Yeah. The second one was purpose. Now, I think most people understand the first purpose of community, and that is security. But I think most people don't pay any attention to the purpose of community beyond that. Here's what's interesting. We live in the safest time in all of history. And so while most people spend a lot of time thinking about security, the irony is we don't actually need to at all. And that's been kind of true and growing in truth for a very long time, which means that our communities can be focused on much more granular issues.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We can focus on women's rights. And there are some very true communities who are focusing on that.
Mm-hmm.
We could also focus on silly things like hair color. And who am I to judge? So the second one is purpose. And the more granular, the better these days.
Mm-hmm.
The third one is projects. Now, projects is a very technical term. So for the people who are listening and they're like glazing their eyes over, it's just, it is a time-bound activity with a deliverable at the end. So in a very real sense, it could be going to meet your friends at the coffee or at the cafe on Saturday morning and having a rousing conversation over an hour while drinking coffee.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That is a project.
So like a shared experience would count as a
Yep.
project.
As long as it's planned and has a deliverable
A
from a
deliverable
community
being
perspective.
a conversation could be a deliverable. Is
Mhm.
that, yeah, okay. I love that.
Drinking coffee could be the deliverable.
Yes, it could.
Having hugs could be the
Mm,
deliverable.
mm-hmm.
But it's got to be planned and it has to be in pursuit of the purpose. It doesn't actually have to accomplish anything. There has to be a deliverable, it has to be planned, and it has to be in pursuit of the purpose.
That all makes sense to me. It really lands.
Yeah. And then the fourth one, and these were the original four. I, again, have realized that there are two more. The fourth one was value. And um, by that, I meant shared value, the value that I receive by being a member in the community and the value that I contribute through my membership.
Mm-hmm. A reciprocity.
Now, that's right. Now, that could be hugs.
Yes.
That could be friendly faces who care about me and want me to show up on Saturday morning to have rousing conversation and drink coffee.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it could also be that one of those people that we show up for on Saturday mornings is really crazy freaking smart. And we buy her the coffee. So she gets her coffee for free every Saturday morning. And in return, we get the absolutely extraordinary brilliance that she's bringing to the table in a very literal sense when she
Mm-hmm.
shows up every week.
Mm-hmm.
That could be it.
I love that. An energy exchange.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. I think that we underestimate the importance of community because from my perspective, when we're a part of a community, we are being vulnerable. There's a vulnerability that comes with being in community, but there's also so much support. And
Yeah.
it takes both the vulnerability and being of support to feel supported. If we never reach that stage where we're being vulnerable, sometimes it's easy to feel like we're not a part of the community.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm saying this as someone who has held back at different times in my life where I didn't want
As have
someone
I.
to see like my true emotions, or if I was hurting, I would come with a smile on my face. And so then sometimes I would leave thinking nobody knows the real me. Even though maybe they felt like they did, I felt like they didn't. And it wasn't until I got really comfortable with experiencing the full range of emotions and being willing to share that with other people that I felt like I really was a part of the community.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Beautiful.
so
Thank you for
good.
sharing.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm curious, what are the other two?
Mm. I'll share them. And then I want to share a different but very modern example of that that idea of community.
Okay.
The fifth one is the social contract. And these are the rules that we choose to live by while we're in the community.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
It turns out they're really important. It also turns out, and pardon me for using some bad words here. It turns out that we right now define people as an asshole when they break the social contract that we accept.
Oh, that's so interesting. And I can instantly tell you, yeah, that rings true.
Yep. It's amazing. I had this realization. I was in Florida, and I was driving on the highway, getting on an off ramp, and there was a line of cars in front of us. And some guy buzzed all the way by, probably 50 cars in the breakdown lane on the right, and it wasn't a police officer. And I said, "Oh my God, what an asshole that guy is!" And instantly, I was like, oh, "I get it."
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Because it wasn't strictly illegal. You can actually drive in the breakdown lane, but he was breaking the social contract.
Right. The social norm that everyone who was in the stalled lane knew about, and the one that he wasn't going to be in.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, that hits.
It was fun, and it hit. So the social contract, the rules that we choose to live by.
Mm-hmm.
And that could be, you go over to family's house, and your family's got this rule that no matter what, you take care of yourself. So if you're thirsty, go get yourself a drink of water. And here's the thing, if you're thirsty and you don't get a drink of water, and you're sitting there stewing in your anger about the fact that you're thirsty and nobody's offered you a drink, I want you to know that you're the asshole.
Mm-hmm.
But if you go to somebody's house who's not family, and you haven't gotten to the point where that social contract, go ahead, go to the kitchen, take care of yourself, applies to you yet, you get to expect that they're going to offer you a drink.
Right.
And it's important to recognize the difference of those two sets of social contracts.
Mm-hmm.
They both apply, they apply differently, and they apply differently in different situations. And understanding community helps you see that.
Right. Absolutely. And that's such a great example, because when we're thinking about the people that we're family with, that's one set of social norms or the contract. And then people that we're more formal with, it's a totally
Mhm.
different contract. I loved that example.
Yeah. And then the sixth one is we actually don't have a word for it in English. So I call it heart as a placeholder. And what I mean by this is it is the sharing and receiving of care and pride
Mm,
inside the community as it pertains to the work that you do with the community and for the community.
mm-hmm.
The sharing and receiving of care. Now, what that could mean is if you don't show up to Saturday morning for coffee, even if you're not that crazy smart person that everybody's really excited to see, if you don't show up and somebody calls you and says, "We missed you," you don't get to be annoyed about that. In fact, what you need to be, in order for you to truly be part of the community, what you need to be is heartened by that. You need to
Mm,
feel like you are seen.
mm-hmm.
And because you are seen, you are missed. They
Mm,
care.
mm-hmm. That feels so good.
Mm.
Yeah, I love those elements of community. And I'm curious about the modern community that you've recently discovered.
Mm. Well, the example I want to share isn't a modern community. It's a different example.
Okay.
When women are raising their children, there's a saying, it takes a village. Who's heard
Mm,
that? Raise your
mhm.
hands.
Yeah.
It takes a village. It does. It does take a village. We cannot do this alone. Here's the thing. If you're middle class, you're very, very well aware that every single role that is played in the village of raising your kids has a cost, and that cost adds up to an enormously huge amount of money. I have a very good friend, Richard Matthews, who actually did the math on what it costs to raise a kid.
Mm,
Apparently, If you're paying reasonably appropriate rates, so livable wages for every single one of the services that you need in order to be able to fill in the roles of It Takes a Village, costs about $350,000 a year to raise a kid. Now, it's still $350,000 a year, or maybe a small amount more than that to raise two kids, and maybe a small amount more than that to raise three kids,
Mm-hmm.
right? So economies of scale do apply, but $350,000 to raise a kid every year,
Mm-hmm.
it takes a village. And um, most of us cannot afford to have that village be a professional village.
Right.
And even if we could, let's ask ourselves for a second. Even if we could, is that the best solution?
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think sometimes it goes back to that vulnerability, being willing to ask for and receive help.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
So the converse of that, paying for all of the services that you need, and think about what kind of work you need to do to be able to bring in that kind of money. $350,000 after paying for your basic living expenses.
Yeah. That's
The
going to rule out
converse
a
of
lot
that,
of teachers and a lot of nurses.
it is.
Yeah.
Um, and 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 honestly, if you spend a minute thinking about that, and you should, what that means is that honestly, the wife in most families is worth more than the husband when she's stay at home. Because
Mm-hmm.
most husbands are not making 350,000, but the wife is saving 350,000 by being there.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Now, I don't want people to misinterpret that and say, see, that's why you should stay home. It's stupid. Instead, you said it already, Brenda. You were 100% right. Rather, what you should say is, see, that's why we need to be vulnerable and create community.
Mm-hmm.
Because now everybody can do the work that their soul is calling them to do. And maybe that's being a stay-at-home mother, and I'm 100% here for that. Maybe that's being a teacher. Maybe it's being a nurse. Maybe it's being a CEO. And I don't care what you look like. If the work that you're called to do, that your soul is singing to you, that's what you should be doing, and create community around you of people who love you and support you and accept your love and support in return,
Yes.
so that you don't have to pay $350,000 for your kids every year in order for them to be raised well.
Absolutely. Everyone should be doing what their heart is calling them to do. Full stop. And if we all did that, we would have such a happy world. Like joy
And it
would
would
be
be
the
$34
dominant.
trillion bigger.
Yes, that too. That too. And joy would be the dominant emotion if people were
Yeah.
allowing themselves to do the things and the work that they really wanted to do. And here's what I've come to realize. Sometimes we think, oh, I have to do this thing because if I don't do this thing, who's going to do this thing? And the thing that I've come to realize is
It might be
there's
your neighbor.
it might be your neighbor. And there are so many different flavors of humans in the world that love different things, that the thing that you don't like is something someone else does like. And so if we're doing work that doesn't light us up, you're actually stealing from somebody who would like that work, and you're poisoning your own well.
Hmm. Let me tell you something. Ah, beautifully said. I do most of my work from home. If I had neighbors on every side of me who loved me and supported me, and I loved them and supported them, and their kids came crashing through my door at 3:30 every single day, I would stop working. And it would be the light of my life to be focused on those kids for the next 2 hours until their parents came home. It would bring so much joy and satisfaction to me. Now, I do amazing things in the world. And those 2 hours are probably worth far more dollars the way that I'm using them now,
Mm-hmm.
by an enormous margin. And I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
If those kids came crashing through my door every single day at 3:30, it would be so delightful that nothing would be able to stop me from playing with kids for 2 hours on weekdays every single day. When people are sitting there saying, who's going to do my babysitting? Well, let me tell you something. Love your neighbors, and you never know what might show up.
Mm-hmm. It's true. It's so true. And, there's a loneliness epidemic all over the world, but especially in the United States. And there are people who are working from home that would love to see a shiny face. And, I made the transition from being surrounded by literally hundreds of people to working alone. And there was a learning curve about how do I do this work and not be lonely?
Yeah.
And, if somebody would have asked me to watch kids or dogs or whatever, I would have been all over it. Just,
Yeah.
for the human contact and the feeling of being a contribution. I think that goes back to that purpose that you're talking about. And I see that in many retirees and people in my parents' community, that the people who have purpose live happier, longer, healthier lives. And so we're actually doing each other a favor when we ask for support in these ways.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that we get a chance to touch on AI. This has been such a juicy conversation, and I'm just kind of in awe about all that we've covered already. And I want to make sure we get to talk about AI. The first time that we had connected, I told you that I was just dipping my toes into Chat GTP. And since then, I'm
Mhm.
getting more and more comfortable with it, really loving it. And now I've started to use some other things for the podcast that are really helping cut down my workload. And so I would love to hear anything you want to share about AI, because I know that I know so little, I don't even know the right questions to ask.
Yeah. I love it. Do we want to talk practical tips or do we want to talk theory? Because my guess is, even though we're opposed to it, we are going to run out of time.
Let's talk practical tips, because I think people can get theory from their neighbors, from the guy at the coffee shop. Let's talk practical tips. How do we best use AI?
Um, Devil's advocate. Are you sure that their neighbor or the guy at the coffee shop is going to be able to tell them why AI isn't going to kill them?
Actually, no, I'm not sure. Why don't can we bridge a little bit of both? A little bit of practical tip and a little bit of theory?
Yes. Um, yeah. So first, we are a very, very long way from Skynet. So let me talk about how AI, as we know it today, has emerged and how that is not what we fear from science fiction movies of the 80s. So the first thing that we did to create anything like AI a very long time ago is we created calculators. If those aren't scary, they should be. Now, we're a long time past the point where those should have been scary, but think about this for a second. You punch a math equation into a machine and it gives you the correct answer almost every time.
Mhm.
That's scary.
Yeah.
Now, we have imbibed that into the cultural consciousness as normal at this point, but that's scary. And it makes us dumber.
Yeah, it does. It does.
Dumber. The average person is worse at math today, worse at speaking today, worse at writing today than the average person was 80 years ago. And that's a trend that will continue. Our reliance on tools makes us weak, and it's not going to stop. Now, I'm not here to plead with you not to be weak. Rather, I think AI is amazing. I think the tools that we have are incredible. I think that the lifestyle that I live, while I would never survive a fist fight with a man from 1,000 years ago, is an amazing lifestyle. And I'm perfectly happy to give up surviving a fist fight with David or Goliath.
Mhm. Mhm.
Perfectly happy to give up that fist fight. I love my life. But AI is making us weaker. The next evolution of AI as we knew it then was something called machine learning. Machine learning was, this is a big, scary term to people even now, and it is so 10 years ago. Machine learning was very simply understanding a discrete set of rules. Just like the calculator, you punch in an equation and the calculator gives you a correct answer. Now stack that on top of each other 5 times, 10 times, 10,000 times so that you can punch in a scenario into a computer and it already knows the answer. Not because it learned it, but because every time it didn't know the answer, it tapped a human on the shoulder and said, I didn't know the answer to this. And the human would then go and put the answer into that table of answers so that the next time you asked it a question, it would already know the answer. That was the first version of chatbots. It's also part of the reason why we all had so much fun playing with them and proving why they were dumb. Well, they weren't dumb. They were just really well-programmed calculators. Now we took that, we evolved it. And what we have today is still not machine learning, but it works the same way. It's a language calculator, and every single word has a probability matrix assigned to it. And that probability matrix includes the words that came before it and helps this word calculator to be able to decide whether or not this word is the appropriate next word based on the last 50,000 words that were entered. It's effectively a very, very huge table of machine learning that has been narrowed down in scope until it's just a probability matrix assigned to a word. Really amazing. It's absolutely phenomenal. So you put in words, and this word calculator then can use this probability matrix to decide which word comes next. Now, to us, it seems like magic. And it brings up images of Skynet and Terminator and all the other scary things. And we should be scared of the future. We should. I'm not telling you not to be. But we don't need to be scared of Skynet today. We need to be scared of other things.
So can I just restate that to make sure I'm understanding you correctly? Essentially, what ChatGPT and the current AI tools are doing are word calculators. So instead of numbers, now we're doing words. Yeah.
That's exactly it.
Okay. Beautiful. So you said we should be scared for the future. Tell us more.
We should be scared of a couple of different things. The first is these are incredibly powerful tools. And the first thing that we need to be scared of is that we don't spend time learning the tools. Put that in your mind for a second. Roll your timeline back 25 years. The word processor was out. All of a sudden, spell check was easy. How many different publishing companies do you believe went out of business in the 1990s because they didn't start using the word processor?
Oh, I don't know that answer, but I'm fascinated.
But I'll bet it's a big number. Go back even further. How many computing companies went out of business because they didn't incorporate the calculator in the 80s?
A lot. A lot. I remember a lot of different computer names. The Amiga was my family's home computer. And so, yeah, I'm sure that there are a lot of those small computer companies that went out for exactly that reason.
Technology was changing and they didn't keep up. Well, you know what? Technology is changing today, and it's no different than a decade ago or 2 decades ago or 3 decades ago. The people, the industries, the companies that don't keep up will be left behind. That's the first thing that we need to be afraid of. And this technology is here to stay and it's not going away. And I told you, it's just a word calculator. It's not going to destroy the world, at least not this version of it, not today.
Right.
So
right.
use it.
Yeah, absolutely. Use it. Absolutely. So can you
the first thing you should be afraid of is being left behind.
Ooh, yes. Agreed. The first thing you should be afraid of is being left behind. And ChatGPT is I tend to be a little tech forward. Like
Mhm.
I'm one of the first adopters of a lot of new tech. I like tech. I like programs. I just it brings me joy. It's fun. And
Me too.
what I've discovered is that ChatGPT is so user friendly. And that if you
Mhm.
take just a minute to, I'm going to use air quotes, train ChatGPT to speak in your language. And what I mean, like literally the way that you put words together, it can come out with some really cool things that doesn't sound like the sparkly unicorn that sometimes ChatGPT can generate if you don't train it.
Yeah. Now, practical tips.
Yes.
Number one, use it. Back in the day, when you had an idea for a story, maybe a news article or a book that you wanted to write, or even just a different way that you wanted to tell stories in the classroom to the kids, what was the first thing you did? Well, you probably sat down with a notepad or a pad of paper and a pen, and you wrote a little bit. You wrote as it flowed until you were done writing, and then you set it aside. And then maybe you came back tomorrow, or a week from tomorrow, or a month from tomorrow, and you picked it up and you wrote some more. And then you took it to a colleague or a friend or a family member and you said, "What do you think?" And you had a conversation with them about it. Then you wrote some more. And then that process repeated over and over and over again. I have on my shelves right over here the book called On Writing by Stephen King. And in that book, he talks exactly about his process. He writes about a page a day until he finishes a manuscript, and then he sets it aside for a minimum of 3 months,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
which means that every single book that he writes probably takes somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 years to finish.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he's a brilliant writer, and his work is absolutely top notch extraordinary. And my recommendation to him would be don't change a thing. But if you're not going to be Stephen King caliber, you can shortcut that process by an enormous amount because of the fact that this tool, ChatGPT, can be your writing assistant, your writing idea plaything. It is a toy and it's a really powerful one. And instead of writing that idea down and coming back in a month and writing a little bit more and coming back in a month again and writing a little bit more and then having a conversation with your family and then writing a little bit more, put the first idea into ChatGPT and it will give you that first set of responses. And maybe they'll be completely and entirely dumb, and you will come back in a month and do the writing some more. Or maybe they will inspire you in a way that 3 months of a little bit of writing and a whole bunch of conversation with a whole bunch of different people would have done. And
Mm-hmm.
now in the matter of 2 or 3 minutes, you've shortcut your process by 3 months.
I love that. That's mind blowing and not totally surprising. I started using this app for the podcast because it helps me generate keywords for search engine
Mhm.
optimization, and it also generates bullet points. And I never use the bullet points as is. I always
Mhm.
use them as an inspiration, a jumping off point. And it's so much fun because it's always interesting to me to load it into this tool to see if what I thought were the major takeaways were also what this software thought were the major takeaways. Sometimes we agree, sometimes we don't. And that's interesting too.
Yeah. Now, I think about this and my scientific training when I was in college. And I think about me bitching and moaning to my instructors about not using a calculator. Now, with more than 20 years of extra perspective, I'm looking back realizing my professors were doing me a service by
Mm-hmm.
keeping me from using a calculator because the calculator is always going to be there and it's always going to be capable of helping me out.
Mm-hmm.
Remember what I said? Technology makes us dumb.
Right.
And by doing the work by hand while I was in college, while my only job in the world was to strengthen my mind, and not just as a muscle, but to change the way that I use the pathways that are there. It made it so much more possible for me to be able to interact with a tool like ChatGPT and get what I want from it because I understand that it's a word calculator. I
Hmm.
understand that it's just doing math probability. In fact, it's math that I probably could rebuild myself. I didn't do it the first time. Don't get me wrong. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not the creator. But because I understand how that all works, I understand the way rules get stacked on top of each other in order to create a matrix output.
Hmm.
I can use that same process to stack my own requests on top of each other in order to create a matrix output from this word calculator that's amazing.
I love that. I love that. So tip number one is to use it. And tip number two is to be creative around how can ChatGPT support whatever it is that you're doing.
Yeah. Now, most people think about being creative in terms of going off into a dark room and meditating or journaling. And those are powerful creative enhancing tools. But there are some other really powerful, in fact, potentially more powerful creativity enhancing tools. Play.
Absolutely.
Go play with children. It will change the way you think of creativity instantly. And
Hmm.
ChatGPT can be playing with children.
Hmm.
But here's the other thing that playing with children is. It's an alternate pathway from what you normally think of as creativity. You're not sitting in front of a canvas with paints. Instead, you're outside tripping over yourself, making a fool of yourself, climbing trees, and following arbitrary rules that you never thought of. And it forces you to be creative. And so here's the next tip, tip number 3. Use more than one tool and use more than one type of tool.
Mm.
So don't just use ChatGPT. Also use any image processing tool. Midjourney is probably the most popular and a fantastic one, but spend the time to get proficient in figuring out how to turn your ideas into not just words, but also images.
I love that. And that software you called Journey?
Midjourney,
The Journey. Okay. Beautiful.
as
I had
opposed
not
to
heard that.
Far Journey or Near Journey, it's Midjourney.
Got it. Mid Journey. Okay. Awesome. That's a great
It will
tip.
scare, and it should scare you. These calculators are scary. It will scare you what kinds of images your words can create with that tool. It's amazing.
Mm.
But the better you get at it, the better you will be at turning your words into an output from those tools.
Hmm. Mm. I love it. It's so good. It's so juicy and it's just ripe with possibility and the different ways that we could apply this to our home lives, to our jobs. I've heard of people, saying that they're hungry for a certain kind of food and asking for a recipe, and then it'll generate a grocery list. That might be one thing that people use. Um, I use it to help me think of what do people really want. So I will type in things I think that people really want, and then it helps me nail down exactly what those things are. And I found that it's very accurate because, like you say, it's a word calculator. So when I type in certain words, it pumps out other matching kinds of energetically feeling words, which is cool.
Yeah, it's amazing. I love it. How are we doing on time? Because I do have some warnings.
Oh, okay. So I have just a few more questions before we can wrap things up. So the first one is, what is one thing you either did or did not do to get to your yes filled life?
Invest in Bitcoin.
Oh, I love it. That was a fast answer. You didn't even
Yeah.
hesitate. Okay.
Oh, yeah. As technology is changing, get on the bandwagon. Like, how much would it have cost to invest $1,000 in Bitcoin in 2011? And what would that have yielded you today? We all know the answer. You'd be a millionaire and you'd have your yes filled life right now. Who
Right.
can't afford $1,000? I mean, probably the people who are listening to you right now, listening to me right now, can afford $1,000. Find off the beaten path ways to spend $1,000 regularly.
Hmm. I love that answer.
My learning from Bitcoin is I have $1,000 a year budget that I spend on things that I have no expectation of return.
I love that. I do that too. Just to like, I'm going to play around with this and let's just see what this investment does.
Yeah, let's just see.
Let's just see. So now for the fun wrapping up questions. What's in your morning mug?
Mm, black coffee.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah,
I like
I
drinking
I
coffee too.
leave I leave a glass, an 8-ounce glass of salt water sitting out on the counter every single night, so that when I get up in the morning, I can drink my salt water. And then I do my morning routine with just the salt water in me. And my morning routine is somewhere between an hour and 80 minutes long. And it involves some movement, a movement practice, some meditation, some nonfiction reading, and sometimes I need to cycle back on that meditation.
Mm, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
And then when I'm done with that, I brew coffee. I drink black coffee until about 10 a.m. And water, black coffee and water. And then at 10 a.m., I don't know if you guys know what bulletproof coffee is, but I do a bulletproof coffee. So I put butter and collagen in my coffee.
That sounds amazing. I'm
Yeah.
all about the coffee, but I always start with like between 16 and 24 ounces of water, just plain
Hmm.
water in the day. And
Hmm.
then I walk around, literally, I go for a walk. First thing, I drink water, get out, walk the dog, and then come back and brew
Hmm.
coffee. I love it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there a podcast that you listen to that you love?
Yes. I listen to Joe Rogan.
Excellent.
I I also listen to Tim Ferriss. Both of them have a tendency to go on forever. I mean, like forever. I would say their average episode length is 2.5 hours, both of them.
Hmm.
Absurdly, insanely long periods of time. But I love it because they ask really weird off the wall questions to really intelligent, very well educated people.
Hmm.
Makes me think.
Yeah. And they're very, very popular podcasts, both of them.
Easy to
Yeah.
find them.
Yes, absolutely. Who inspires you?
That's a fun question. Um, I'm probably most inspired these days by my wife, um, and my business partner, uh, co-founder of the Ecstatic Way, Caitlin Cogan, the owner. They inspire me a lot.
Amazing. Amazing. And my last
And
question. Oh, I'm
your
sorry.
mother.
And my mother. Yes. Go ERA. Yeah.
That's right.
Before I ask you this last question, I want to make sure that we let listeners know how they can connect with you. Where can they find you?
Best place to find me is either on my podcast, elementsofcommunity.us, because I'm a community guy and it's about us.
I love that.
Or my personal name, lucasroot.com.
Awesome. And I will put all those links in the show notes.
Yeah.
And the last question is if you ever find yourself in a funk, feeling scared or sad or mad, what do you do to flip the switch to allow yourself to access joy?
I love it. So much fun. It's so juicy. Ooh. Um, there are two answers. There is the short answer and the long answer, and I have to have both.
Hmm.
The short answer is I have a very specific protocol that involves number one, either dancing or shadow boxing, which is movement. And I can do it for a very short time to pop myself out of the groove. But here's the thing. Uh, Mentally and emotionally, all of us will fall back into the groove unless we reprogram ourselves while we're sitting there suspended in the air. So dancing or shadow boxing, that pops me up out of the groove. And then in order to reprogram myself to get me into the groove, I do a little bit of play. And that could be doing something silly like making dog noises and jumping up and down like an ape. And then I do a mantra, very short. You don't have to do it for a long time. And the mantra is, it sort of depends on where I'm headed. But the mantra is something like, And this leads to the long answer. The mantra is something like, I will experience joy for the next hour while I do my work. Um, and, and this is really important for me at least, and I find that most people are this way. And I will do that next thing. Now, that
Mm,
next thing is very specific for me. And that's the long answer, the big piece. And for me, if I'm getting into a funk and it's regular, if I'm having a hard time accessing joy and it's regular, then it's going to come back. And so even doing a little bit of dancing and a little bit of play and a little bit of mantra work to put me into a joy or flow approach for a little while, it's only going to last for a little while because there's something that's dragging me back into that funk.
hmm
And we have to process that. And for me, the way to process that is to go spend time in the woods, in nature alone. My wife calls it my time on the mountain.
mm,
And so for me, in my mantra, I actually have to tell myself when I will go to the mountain
mm.
this weekend or today or something like that.
I love that answer. I love it. Lucas, thank you so much for being a guest.
My pleasure, Brenda. This has been great.
It's been so much fun. Thank you.
Yeah.
Isn't Lucas amazing? Here are the takeaways. Number one, leaving corporate careers to pursue fulfilling work truly feels like freedom. Number two, you are selling all the time, whether you realize it or not. Consider the ways you sell your loved ones on things. In Lucas's example, he mentioned selling your kids on not running into the street. If you have a fear of sales, realizing the ways you're already selling can be supportive, especially if a fear of selling has kept you from starting your own business. Number three, a study by McKinsey revealed that only 5% of C suite executives are women. If this could change and we achieved gender parity in the C suites, it would infuse the global economy with $34 trillion based on the stats provided in that study. Number four, Lucas talked about 6 elements of community. And here they are. Number one, language. That includes inside stories, the way we shake hands, our words, and the way we dress. Number two, purpose. Security is often the primary purpose of community, but our communities can focus on much more granular issues. In fact, Lucas says they should. He says the more granular, the better. Number three, projects. A time bound activity with a deliverable at the end. Examples Lucas provided included meeting friends for coffee on a Saturday morning. The thing about a project is it needs to be planned and needs to be in pursuit of the purpose and have a deliverable. Number four, value. In this shared value, the value you receive and the value you contribute are important. That could be hugs and friendly faces. It could also be considered an energy exchange rather than a direct reciprocity. Number five, social contracts. The rules we choose to live by while we are in community. And the sixth element of community is heart. Lucas tells us there's no exact word in English, but essentially it's the sharing and receiving of care and pride as it pertains to the work you do with and for the community. Takeaway number five, it's no secret that raising children comes with a financial burden. Building community to help you raise your children is a way to help create that village of the proverbial, it takes a village to raise a child. Number six, there is a loneliness epidemic. Human connection is critically important. Invitation to consider how you can create a community with the people around you. Can you ask for help? Can you offer to help? Lucas said, love your neighbors and you never know what will happen. Number seven, use technology to enhance your creative processes. We talked about the potential risks and rewards of artificial intelligence, known as AI. And we talked about how ChatGPT is essentially a calculator predicting outcomes for words. The most important thing you can do with AI is to use it. Try it or risk being left behind. Number eight, you can easily enhance creativity by playing with children and finding ways to have fun. And finally, number nine, Ways to access joy and programs oneself with a positive mindset include mantras, exercise, and intention. To connect with Lucas, you can reach him on Instagram at LUCROOT, Luke Root. His website is lucasroot.com, and he's also got links for LinkedIn, Facebook, and the podcast in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening to Your Yes Filled Life. If you loved this episode, and I hope that you did, would you please consider sharing it with someone that you care about? Especially thinking back to Lucas and my request, could you please share it with one man and one woman? And if you haven't yet left the podcast a rating or a review, that is probably one of the most impactful things you can do to support your yes-filled life. Thank you so much for being here today. Bye for now. Until next time.